One of my favorite sweet treats of Christmas are peppermints and candy canes. Not only do they make really cute home decor, but they're a great way to give a little treat to the people you love. Hey everyone, thanks for coming to hang out with me in the craft room today. If you're new here, my name's Jess. I'm really excited to get crafting. I hope you are too. Let's get started. A while back, I saw this wreath at Joann Fabrics. I made one for fall, and I knew that I wanted to make one for Christmas too. I grabbed 2 of the wire wreath forms from the Dollar Tree, and I got this spray paint from Walmart. This is by Rust-Oleum, and it's the color Apple Red. I gave each of the wreath forms 1 coat of the red spray paint. In addition to the 2 wreath forms, I also grabbed 3 rolls of the peppermint striped ribbon from the Dollar Tree. I laid the wreath forms out so that the back sides were together and the curved edges faced outwards. I also made sure that the crossbars on all of the sections were lined up with each other, and to attach the 2 wreaths together, I added a small amount of hot glue right where that crossbar section is, and then I took a piece of cotton twine and tied the 2 wreath forms together. I only did this around the outside of the wreath form. I didn't bother going through on the inside of the crossbars because once I had all of the sections glued and tied together, I felt that it was secure enough. To get started on the ribbon, I added a small amount of hot glue to the back side of the wreath form, attached my ribbon, and then I just started wrapping it around the wreath form at a slight angle. As I was wrapping the ribbon around, when I would get about halfway through the section, I would add another small amount of hot glue to the back side and continue wrapping. And I made sure that every time I came to the end of a section where that crossbar was, that I would add more hot glue. When I would come to the end of 1 roll of ribbon, I would just place a little hot glue on the ribbon and attach my second roll right to that ribbon. I let the glue set really well before I continued wrapping around the wreath form. Once I had wrapped my ribbon the whole way around the wreath form, I hot glued it to the very first section that I had placed down. I didn't cut the ribbon, and then I just started going back in the opposite direction so that it formed an X pattern across the front of the wreath. Now that all my ribbon is in place on my wreath, I could get to work on adding in the florals and the other decorations. I'm trying really hard this year not to buy any extra Christmas florals because I kind of went crazy last year after Christmas buying all the clearance things. So I'm really trying to just use up what I have. I had these really pretty silver leaves from the Dollar Tree. I had some other silver sparkly branches from the Dollar Tree. I had a bunch of frosted greenery that I can't even remember where I got it from. So I just started layering it onto my wreath until I liked how it looked. I also had a little snowflake ornament in my stash that I thought would be really pretty as sort of the focal point of the bottom of this wreath. I did add that into the center, and then I also found these little miniature candy canes from Walmart, and I tucked those in here and there. This is where you can really get creative and kind of customize how you like it. I decided to keep this more on the shiny, sparklier side because I really liked the foil red color in the ribbon from the Dollar Tree, so I really wanted to bring out that shine with some extra sparkle. Another fun way to add some peppermint to your holiday decor is by creating fake packages. Now you could use regular boxes here that you get from Amazon, but I have a ton of these wooden crates in my stash that I've collected from the Dollar Tree. So I grabbed 3 in 3 different sizes, and I gave each of them 1 coat of white chalk paint. While my paint was drying, I got to work on creating the bows for all of my packages. For the smallest package, I created just a simple loop over bow where I looped over the ribbon 1 time, hot glued it into place, then I cinched it in the center, tied it with some twine, and then I wrapped another piece of ribbon around the center to finish it off. And I always like to dovetail the ends of my bows. For the medium-sized package, I'm making a bow using the awareness ribbon technique. So you loop a piece of ribbon around so it forms the awareness ribbon like you would see for Breast Cancer Month. And then you just fold everything together, cinch it in the center. And this time I decided to use a zip tie to hold everything in place for the center of my bow. And then once again, I took another small piece of the same ribbon, wrapped it around the center, hot glued it into place, and I dovetailed my ends. For my largest package, I decided to create a big poofy loopy bow, and I'm using the method that I learned from watching Olivia at Olivia's Romantic Home. I'll make sure that I link her channel below, although I'm sure you've already heard of her. I started out with one bundle. I measured out 8 inches. I looped the ribbon over about 6 times so that there were 3 loops on each side. I cut that off. Then I moved down 2 inches, so another bundle I created 6 inches wide, again looping it over until I had 3 loops on each side. And then I went for a third bundle that I dropped down to 4 inches, doing the same thing, looping it over on itself until I had 3 loops on each side. And then I also cut a piece for the tails. Once I had all of my bundles and my tails cut, I went through and I folded each piece in half, and I cut a notch on either side, only about 1/4 inch in towards the center. This is just going to help so that whatever you choose to use to tie your bow with, whether it's a zip tie or a pipe cleaner or a piece of ribbon or a piece of twine, it'll have some place to go when you put those little notches in the center of each bundle. I'm using a zip tie again for this bow. I stacked all of my bundles from the shortest one to the longest one, and I added my tails onto the bottom. I wrapped the zip tie around, making sure that it went inside all of those notches I cut, and then I tightened everything up. After the zip tie was in place, then I just started pulling all of the loops out of all 3 bundles and really giving this ribbon a good fluff. Now, I will say, because this ribbon, it's kind of hard to see on camera, but it actually has a velvet texture to it, and it made it more difficult because the fabric wanted to stick to itself. So I definitely think if this ribbon were the typical sort of satin finish ribbon, it would have fluffed out a lot better. So this did take a little more fluffing than a normal ribbon would, but in the end, I really liked how it looked. Now that my paint was all dry on my wood crates, I used the same ribbon again, and I started by hot gluing on the inside of one of the crates and wrapping a piece of ribbon around the back side of the crate and hot gluing it in place on the other side. Then all I had to do was hot glue each of my bows anywhere I wanted on the crate. Some of them I put them off to the side, some of them I put in the center, but in the end it's up to you how you want to decorate yours. And even though I'm going with a peppermint candy cane theme for my packages, this would be a great way to add in any type of ribbon that fits your style. If traditional round wreaths aren't really your thing, don't worry, the Dollar Tree has you covered. They have these really cute candy cane wreath forms out this year. I grabbed one of those, a really cute sign, and some of this peppermint striped ribbon again. And I also grabbed one of these microfiber cloths from the automotive section. I laid the cloth out on my cutting mat, and using my rotary cutter, I first cut off the seam that's on one end of the cloth, and then from there I just cut 2-inch strips going the whole way across the length of the cloth. I added some hot glue towards the bottom of the candy cane wreath form. I laid my cloth over and folded it so that it would have a nice finished edge across the bottom. Once I had that in place, then I just started using the cloth the same way you would use a piece of ribbon. I just started wrapping it around the wreath form on a slight diagonal until I got to the end of the first strip. And then every time I added a new strip of the cloth, I just made sure that I was gluing it onto the back side so that you wouldn't see any of those raw edges of where one strip ended and the next one began. I just continued wrapping until I had the whole wreath form covered in car wash cloth strips. Once I got towards the end of the candy cane, before I wrapped that last strip on, I took another smaller piece of the cloth and I folded it up over the edge just to make sure that none of that wire wreath form showed after I had the strips in place. So once I laid that piece down, then I continued and I applied my last strip of car wash cloth. I wanted to cover up those raw edges from the cloth with some of this peppermint striped ribbon. At first I tried to just wrap it up around the candy cane wreath form, but I think because of the angle and because of the shape of the wreath form, the ribbon wasn't quite laying right. So I found that it was easier if I cut strips first that would be long enough to wrap around the wreath form, and I just glued each stripe into place individually. This really didn't take much more time, but I'm really glad that I did it that way because I like the look of it a lot better than just trying to wrap the ribbon up around. I also made sure that as I was gluing each ribbon into place that I was only adding hot glue to either the very edges of the wreath form or the back side, just to make sure that none of that hot glue seeped through the ribbon and you wouldn't be able to see it from the front. I did have 2 strips of the car wash cloth left, so I just cut the one into a few pieces and I hot glued them on the back side just to cover up all of the edges of the ribbon and the edges of the cloth. I thought the arrow on this sign was perfect for this wreath form. I just pulled it off of the ribbons that was attaching it to the little red truck, but I'll definitely keep that truck because I'll use that in another DIY. I gathered up a few branches. I wanted to keep it pretty simple because I really wanted that sign to be the focal point of this wreath, but it needed a little something behind it. I glued a couple of greenery branches and a couple of these sparkly silver branches down to the wreath form, and then I hot glued the sign on top. Next time you're at Dollar Tree, make sure you look for other things that you can use for crafting besides what's in the Crafter Square aisle. I grabbed a pack of these sponge rollers so I could make a really cute peppermint garland. I had a pack of this red and white striped tissue paper on hand, but I did check while I was at the Dollar Tree and they still carry it now. It's usually in the party section with all the gift wrap and the bows. I cut a piece that was just a little wider than the rollers I'm using. They actually had 2 different size rollers there, but I chose to use the smaller ones for this craft. I opened it up and I took out the plastic part because I only need the sponge for this project. Before stringing it onto my twine, I took my sponge roller and I rolled it up inside that piece of tissue paper I cut. I found it was easier if I placed a piece of clear tape down first, then rolled it up and put another piece on top. Now you'll see here that I'm using some cotton twine, but in the end I actually changed it out for some red yarn instead. But all I did was run my twine or yarn through my plastic needle because it had a really large eye on it, so it was easier to get the string through. I placed the candy on the garland where I thought it would look good, and then I used another piece of twine and I tied each end so that it would look like a wrapped candy. To add a second layer to my garland, I picked up one of these pom-pom makers that you can find at the Dollar Tree, and I wanted to make some pom-poms because I think those pom-pom garlands are so cute. This tool was pretty easy to use. The directions were pretty self-explanatory. You open the whole thing up, you wrap each side until it's full of yarn, close it back up, and then snip your way around the outside. There's a little channel there so your scissors fit in it pretty nicely. And then you tie through the center with another piece of string and pop the 2 sides apart and you have your pom-pom. I did have to trim some of the longer pieces, but it was really easy to use and it was a great value for just $1.25. The piece that I used to tie around the center of the pom-pom, I kept long because that's what I used to tie it onto my red yarn. So you can see here, this is where I decided to switch out from that white twine to some red yarn. I'm using 2 lengths of the red yarn just so that it was a little bit thicker and it would show up better. I used the center of the length of the yarn first, and then I used my ruler to help space out where I wanted to put the pom-poms from either side. Here you can see I took the candies off of that white twine and added them to 2 pieces of the red yarn also. Then I laid everything out. I made sure that the pom-pom garland was a little bit longer than the candy garland, and I tied both ends together. I also have some fun ideas how you can give peppermints and candy canes as treats to your family and friends. I grabbed a pair of these fun red and white striped fuzzy socks from the Dollar Tree, a clear mug, and of course some peppermints. I laid the socks out, and starting at the toes, I started rolling until I got to the other end of the socks, and I held the roll in place with a clear hair elastic. I created a decal using my Cricut Joy, and I wanted to compare some of the Cricut products with the products that you can find at the Dollar Tree. Now, I will say I used the sticky mat that you can find at the Dollar Tree, and it worked great in my Cricut Joy. But when I picked up one of these pickers that you can use to weed out your images, the one from the Dollar Tree is a lot thicker than the Cricut brand one, which was fine for the most part, but when I was trying to pull out those tiny pieces in some of the letters, the one from the Dollar Tree was just way too thick to get those tiny pieces. So for the most part, I would say definitely the mat that you can get for the Cricut Joy is a great value and it works really well. But as far as the weeding tool goes, I would probably skip that one just because I tend to do things that are a little more detailed, and I don't think it would work for smaller pieces like that. So you can see here, I'm adding the decal to the front of my mug. It just says old-fashioned candy canes, and I cut out 2 small candy canes in silver and put those on either side. I didn't design this. This is actually available just in Cricut Design Space, but of course, if you don't have a Cricut, you could just leave this plain and it would be just as cute. I added a few peppermints to the bottom of my mug, then I tucked in my rolled up sock, and I added a few more peppermints around the edges of the sock just because there was a gap there, and that way it held it in place and it looked really cute because this is a clear mug. Then I took a barbecue skewer, I cut a piece off, and I had some of this vase filler on hand. I think they have this out at the Dollar Tree again this year. It looks like little snowballs in white and silver. I grabbed one of the white ones, cut down the stick just a bit more, and tucked it into the top of the socks so that it looked like a little mini cupcake. To finish off my mug, I just tied a simple bow with some red and white gingham ribbon that I had on hand on the handle of the mug. I didn't glue it in place. That way, whoever I give this to can just untie it and take it off when they need to wash the mug. When I have people over at the holidays, I love to put out little favors at each place setting, and this project's perfect for this. I'm using the envelope punch board by We Are Memory Keepers. I'll make sure that I have all of these paper crafting supplies listed in the description box below. I'm also going to need a scoreboard, a paper trimmer, and some red cardstock. I started by cutting my cardstock down to 5.5 inches by 6.5 inches. Then I got out my scoreboard, and on the 5.5 inch side I scored at 1 inch and 4.5 inches, and on the 6.5 inch side I scored at 1/2 inch, 2 inches, 3.5 inches, and 5 inches. And don't worry, I'll have all of these measurements listed in the description box below. Now I just started folding up the box. All of the folds are going to go in the same direction. So on the 5.5 inch side, the 2 score lines that I made, I folded them in towards the box, and then I flipped it over and started working and folding all of my lines in towards the same side of the box. Now, starting on the 5.5 inch side where that 1/2 inch score mark is, I folded that tab down, and where the other score mark is, I'm going to line that up inside the center of where the envelope punch board cuts. Once you press down and you do the notches, when you unfold the flap, it creates a hole. So I'm going to fold the next one down, line that score mark up in the center, do that on both sides, and again, when you open it up, it creates a hole. So I'm just going to keep folding each flap over and placing it in the punch board, punching it out, and then I have holes that run along both sides of the piece of cardstock. And once I got to the end, I also created 2 more notches on the end. You don't have to do this next step, but I wanted to give my box a little more character, so I grabbed a pair of my decorative scissors and I just cut along each side of the box where I had placed those holes. I have seen decorative scissors at the Dollar Tree, so keep your eye out for those. To close up my treat box, I took a bit of double-sided tape from my tape gun and I ran it along that 1/2 inch flap on the one side. Then all I had to do was fold that flap over and bring the other side up to meet it and push everything in place. Now I have a little square box, And everywhere those holes are, I just started bending the paper slightly in towards the center so that it would curve a little better. I gave a little pinch to each end, and then I took some twine and I tied it right around the end, right in the center of where those holes are. After I had the first end tied shut, then I added some peppermint candies to my box and I tied the other end closed the same way. I just pinched everything together and used some twine to tie it. It doesn't have to be super tight. You don't want to run the risk that you're going to rip your paper. It just needs to be closed enough so that none of the candies fall out. I kept the decorating on my boxes pretty simple. I had some of this white eyelash trim in my stash. I used to get this at the Dollar Tree and then they didn't have it for a while, but I've seen it there recently again, so keep your eye out for it. I wrapped some around each end of this box and then I just tied a simple bow out of that same peppermint ribbon and glued that onto the front. For a different version on a second box, I actually wrapped the whole box with some of that clear cello wrap that you can get in the party section before I tied the eyelash trim on the ends. And then for that one, I colored in a wooden candy cane sticker that you can get at the Dollar Tree and glued that on the front. I also think this would look really cute if you used patterned scrapbook paper rather than just plain cardstock. And for something different, if you know you're going to put this out for a dinner party, I think it would be really cute if you put the person's name on the box as well. I think hot cocoa and candy canes go hand in hand. Now these hot cocoa pouches are not my original idea. I did see these from another YouTuber, so I'll be sure to include that link to that video in the description box. I took one standard size envelope and I sealed it shut with some double-sided tape just because you never know how well that adhesive is going to hold on an envelope. I placed it in my paper trimmer and from one end I cut up 4 1/4 inches, then I flipped it over and from the other end I cut up another 4 1/4 inches and it created 2 pouches. I happen to have some candy cane striped paper in my scrapbook stash. This one's by Echo Park. So I took that piece and I cut 2 squares out of it that measured 4 inches by 4 inches. Now, if you don't have a lot of scrapbook paper, you could always use wrapping paper, or if you tend to save Christmas cards, I think cutting the fronts out of Christmas cards would look really cute on these as well. Once I had my squares cut out, then I went back to my pouches and I used some double-sided tape again on my pieces of scrapbook paper and I just adhered 1 to each side of my pouch. Since my paper didn't have a direction to it, I didn't have to worry about which side was up. I just stuck it down on my pouches. But depending on what you're using, just be aware of where the opening of the pouch is so that you can make sure you get the top of the paper towards the top of the pouch. If you know who you're going to give this to, I think this would be a great place to add a Christmas tag or a to from label. You could put their name on it. I didn't know who I would give mine to, so I kept my decorating simple with just a few stickers, and I even added a little chipboard mug with a candy cane in it that I found in my stash. Then as an extra embellishment, I added a simple bow to the corner. I tucked in my pouch of hot cocoa along with the candy cane, and there's even enough room in these pouches that you can add a gift card as well. Thanks for coming to hang out with me today. I always love hearing from you, so make sure you leave me a comment and let me know which one of these was your favorite, and also let me know which sweet treat of Christmas is your favorite. All right, everyone, have a great week. I'll talk to you in the next one.